In this lesson, we'll be talking about Figma Tools panel and specifically shape tools. Before we jump into frames, groups, slices, and everything else, let's talk about frames. Let's talk about shape tools. Let's talk about shapes because it's really cool to start creating something first, and then we'll start working with these shapes, learning about their parameters, what you can change, what you can do with them, and also you can start adding them to groups, group these elements together, and at the same time you can add them into the frames. What is the difference between frame and group? What is frame? We'll be talking about in the next lessons. But let's go everything step by step so you will understand exactly what's happening, exactly what to do, and how we'll achieve the best results in the end. So Figma Tools panel, where is that? Where is the shape tools? First of all, from the previous lesson, you know that our tools panel is here in the top left corner where you see these elements: move, scale, frame, section, slice. Here we have shapes, here we have pen and pencil, text, and then we have three parameters that are not exactly that help us to create something like the design that we want to create, but they help us to navigate in our design and also work with Figma directly. I would personally, these three tools, I would move them separately from all of these four or these five. Why? Because these five parameters will actually help you to create something and change parameters of your designs. And today specifically, we'll be talking about shape tools here: rectangle, line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, star, and image. As you can see, place, image, video is not the shape itself, and it's called the place. It's not image and video, it's place, image, and video. Because in design, you have to understand that in design, we don't have image as an object itself. Well, you can say that, but usually image is inside of the shape. When you see the rectangle and the image inside of the rectangle, it's a rectangle that has as its fill option the image. Not color, not gradient, but the image. The same with video. Or it can be a circle like your profile picture, and inside of this circle you see the image. But it's circle, it's still, the shape is circle. Basically in design, what we need to understand that design consists of just a couple of things. It consists of text and shape. And then the container that has text and shape. That's it. So the shape can be different, starting from line, rectangle, circle, star, just whatever you want, like the shape, and also text. And then working together with shape and text, you achieve a specific result. For example, when you want to create a button, you create the background shape, and on top of it you put text. When you want to create header, it's just text. When you create paragraph, it's text. When you're creating a poster, it's just a few shapes and text. When you're creating a logo, usually it's a couple of lines, or you're using again text. So basically, all like the entire design you can combine under text and shape. If you want to, if it will be easier for you this way to understand, text, shape, and line. If you want to put line as a separate object, and by line I mean all the curves and everything, like when you're creating something like this, you're like, yeah, is it a shape? Well, that's a shape, but if you want to call it line, you can call it line. But that's everything. These are all the elements that we are using in visual design. Why I said visual? Because we can also create voice user interface, and in this case we are using just logic. In this case we'll be using, for designing the logic, we'll be using just text. Well, and some shapes as well. I'll show you what voice UI is a little bit later. Today what we need to understand that every single piece of design, of visual design, is text and shape and a container that holds them. When we're talking about poster, this can be a piece of paper. When we are talking about website, web page, it's a digital web page. So basically the container is our browser screen, and this is exactly what we see. Remember, text, shape, and line. That's all. That's all. Don't overcomplicate things. So it's better to simplify them and then start from here, growing. And everything in our world consists of simple elements, like atoms. Before that, even like electrons, protons, atoms, molecules. And this is when you understand that, oh, okay, this is what consists of. What will happen if I take text and shape together? And boom, we have a logo, we have an icon, we have a poster, we have a line, we have a banner, something really new, something incredible, right? So by combination of simple elements, you create something complex, something really huge, maybe not huge, but complex 100%. And today, let's talk about shape tools that we see here. We will not be talking today about the parameters of these tools, because when we'll be talking, first of all, this is introduction to Figma. We have to understand Figma fundamentals, and I want to give you Figma fundamentals step by step, so you understand absolutely everything. And we'll go like small steps, so by the end you understand absolutely everything and it will stay in your head forever. So what shapes do we have? When I click on this arrow, when I click on the rectangle itself will be selected. That's it. Now, when I navigate to my main area, to my canvas, canvas is exactly where I'm creating everything in Figma. This middle area, what we discuss about user interface. So we have two header rows. We have left sidebar, right sidebar with the parameters, and we have canvas. And this is where we're creating. We're like artists. Yes, design is not art, but we are like artists. We create design on canvas. And this is our canvas, and this is where we create our shapes. Once I clicked here on the shape itself, and I create this rectangle. Maybe you don't see it yet, just because our background is too close to the color of the shape that I'm creating. I'm gonna change that. Now you know how to do that, right? Background, you click here and you change it to whatever you want. You can make it lighter, you can make it darker. In this case, let's go with a little bit darker version so you see it better. So shapes, when I click on the rectangle itself, I'm creating rectangle directly. But when I click on the arrow, I will see all other shapes. And all other shapes, what we have: rectangle, line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, star, and then place image. Let's go one by one without changing their parameters, but by creating them so you understand what to do. When you click on rectangle here, now you can create rectangle, and just by holding, all the shapes are created in Figma from the top left corner. So when I create a rectangle, by the way, to call rectangle, to start creating rectangle without navigating to the panel, just simply click R. The letter R on your keyboard, and this is the hotkey for creating rectangles. So once you start creating, you see what's happening. And here you press R. If you, no, it will be too much. Let's start. The shapes by default in Figma are creating from the top left corner, and this is what you create from the top left corner. Later we will discuss how we can change that. The shape, the rectangle itself, as you can see, can be smaller rectangle, can be wider rectangle. If you want to create a square, then hold Shift before you start creating a rectangle. Shift, and while you are holding it, when you create, the proportions will be one by one. So the height will be equals width. This is how you create squares. And of course, you can also create like tall objects. That's it. So basically the parameters are pretty simple. What you're working with width and height, and you can create absolutely any rectangle. Click here, rectangle, or press R. By the way, when you see the shape, when you see absolutely anything in Figma, and you see that there is a letter or a combination of buttons here, please start using them immediately. You see the R, and it shows the hotkey for the rectangle is R. Immediately press R on your keyboard, By the way, when you start creating a rectangle, if you just click without dragging, you will create a rectangle 100 by 100%. It's always like that. So press R. Now I'm in a rectangle creation mode. Start dragging and you're creating a shape. When you're dragging to the left side, then the point where you started creating will stay always in the same position. And this is how you you can play with that if it makes you feel better. But yeah, press R and you will get a rectangle. The next shape is line, and as you can see, L. So this time I'm not going to click line from there. I'll immediately click L on my keyboard, and now I create line. And line, as you can see, the starting point is where we clicked, and then when I start dragging, you can set the direction in which the line will be positioned. And then when I release the button, release my cursor, the line is created. Similar to rectangle, when I'm holding shift, when I press L and I'm holding shift, the line will be created only in one of the directions, like it will be created horizontally, vertically, or by 45 degrees. So when you want to create, for example, 45 degrees line, this is how you do that. You hold shift. And the next thing is when you press L to create line, when you're holding option, then the line will be created in both directions, left and right. And by holding shift at the same time, shift alt or shift option, the line will be created in both directions, left and right, from the middle, from the point where you started creating the line. You're just choosing under which angle. This is super useful and convenient when you're creating posters or when you're creating lines in your web design, when you start your positioning from the middle of the screen. The same, by the way, with rectangle. Let's get back to our rectangle and press option. When I press option, then the rectangle will be created from the middle of the point where I started creating it. So when I press the cursor, this will be my midpoint of the rectangle. When I hold the same at the same time, I start holding shift, and now I'm creating a rectangle, a square, from the middle, from the center of this rectangle shape. And by dragging left and right, up and down, I'm changing the size of it. This is how it works. This is how you can manipulate shapes and how you create them from different directions. Now we're just creating them. Later we'll be talking about their parameters, like width, height, x, y position, radius, rotation, color, and everything else will be in the next lessons. Right now we are creating them, so please repeat after me, repeat after. Start creating shapes first. The faster you learn how to create shapes, the easier it will be for you with other shapes when you will start working with them, and it will be easier for you to understand, oh, right now I need to create a shape, but I will start not from the top left corner. I will just go from the center of the screen and will go in both directions, and I will have a straight line. By holding shift, I know that I can create the straight line from left to right. And it will save you lots of your time. Next shape is arrow. As you can see, shift L. When I press shift L, now I see that the arrow will be selected. And now I create an arrow. And I can put it into different directions. The same as line, and the same if I hold shift, then the line will be created in a particular direction. And if I press at the same time option or alt if you are on Windows, then the line will be created from the middle screen, from the point where we pressed our cursor button. So this is how we work that. What's the difference between line and arrow? Once I release the button, when I take a look, Now this is our line. This is our line with an arrow at the one joint of this line. You can change the color here if you want to. We'll be talking about all these parameters a little bit later. Now you have arrow. This is specifically useful when you create the points. For example, when you create something like a user flow, from this screen we're going to the next screen, and you create the line between them to show this is how it goes. Or when you're creating post for Instagram and you show that you have to swipe that direction. In this case, you create line and boom, you'll position, we will direct user's eye in a particular direction. So this is why lines are cool. Another way how to create lines, I'll show you a little bit later. Next thing is ellipse. And as you can see, okay, how to create an ellipse, I press O, and now ellipse is selected. I can create absolutely any ellipse without holding anything else, but just dragging. By pressing without dragging, just by clicking, I create the ellipse 100 by 100%. So when you need to create something 100 by 100%, like a rectangle or circle, just simply select the tool that you want, the shape that you want to use, and press the button one time, and then it will be 100% by 100%. Super useful when you're creating, for example, profile images. The next thing, when we working with ellipses, by holding Shift, you're creating a circle, not the ellipse, but circle. And the same way, by holding Shift and Option or Alt, you create circle, but from the center of the point where you clicked. Sometimes can be really super useful when you have, for example, let's go with the tools that we have. So let's imagine that you have two lines, right? And we have another line here. And now I want to create this circle right from the intersection of these two objects. If I start creating them holding Shift, then I'll need to position it somehow. By the way, when you see the shape or frame or group or anything, when you select it, by using the tools Move, you just move the shape. This is how it works here in Figma. And as you can see, all the layers in our layers panel, you will see everything will be created as a new layer here. When you're creating ellipse, it's ellipse. When you're creating line, it's line. When you're creating a rectangle, it will be a rectangle. So again, you created a circle, and now to position them, it right in the intersection of these two lines, you have to move it. But it will be much easier when you press O, you navigate directly to the middle of this, to the intersection of these two lines. You press your cursor, you press Option, Shift, and now when you're creating it, you're creating right from the intersection of these two lines. This is where it can be useful. Sometimes it's just must have, and it will save you, again, hundreds of your hours. I want you to be efficient, so that's why I'm teaching you these additional things. Now when you're selecting out of the frame and you are move your cursor, drag your cursor from the point where you want to start with. It can be from bottom, from top. You can start from here. You will see that elements will be selected. You can remove them if you don't need them anymore. That's it. So this is about ellipse discussed. Next thing is polygon. When you click on the polygon, by default, the polygon is triangle. Again, the same as with rectangle and ellipse. You can create rectangle of absolutely any width and height. It can be wide. You can create another one. Shapes like polygon and star, they don't have the hotkey in this case. In this case, you just navigate here and press on the element that you want to create, and that's it. So wide triangle, then we have tall triangle, and then when you select triangle, in this case again, by holding shift, I'll create the the triangle with absolutely equal sides. And when I click here again on the triangle by holding Option and Shift or Alt and Shift, I'm creating the triangle with absolutely equal sides, but from the point where from the center of it. But what's cool about these shapes, of course I could discuss it in the next lessons when we're about different shapes, when we will be talking about parameters, but I want to show you what you can do also with when you're creating triangle or star. As you can see, when I'm navigating, when I'm hovering on the shape itself, I see two dots here. And one is radius, we'll be talking about it later. But specifically when you're creating polygons like triangle, you see count here. When you click on this dot and you start moving your cursor in the counterclockwise, you change the count, the number of polygons of the sides of the shape. The more you have, the more it becomes a circle, similar like in real life. And then we can move it if you want to create, for example, pentagon, then you just move it and you have pentagon. Hexagon, boom. Octagon also will be here. So basically this is how you create different sides of shapes. If you want to create hive, for example, this is how you do that. You create multiple hexagons and then you select them and move. How to create shapes, how to create it, make it much faster, I'll show you in the next module when we'll be talking about graphic design, how to create patterns. So this is how you create these different shapes like polygon tools with more size rather than just a triangle. Discussed the polygons. Now let's go to stars. When you click on the star, again, you can create this star. You can create this star. Usually we never use these stars, right? So that's why I recommend you to hold shift to create a proportional star. To keep the proportions, this is exactly why we're using shift. And if you want to create the star from the middle of the from the center of the point that you're creating, similar that we created for the intersection between two lines, this is what you create. When you created a star, star has three dots now. Let's take a look at them, what they allow you to do. The first one is count. We already know what count is. Radius, we'll be discussing it a little bit later. Just because radius requires a little bit more stuff that I want to cover here, and how to work with the radius, how to become a pro in corner radiuses, ready. We'll discuss it a little bit later. But here we have one additional point, ratio. And what is the ratio? The ratio is the ratio between the middle point of the star and its furthest point from the star. And when we are changing this ratio, as you can see, the star becomes smaller and smaller, smaller and smaller, thinner and thinner. And here we have thicker star. Why is it cool? Because in different cases we can use this tool to create and achieve different effects. By default, when we have this ratio about like 38%, we have an absolutely perfect star. You can use this star when you're creating, for example, reviews. You can use this star as a starting position. You can use the shape, the star shape, to show the reviews, like the score for this review. And here we have like 4 out of 5 stars, or it can be 3 if you want to change the color. How to do that super fast, I'll show you again in the next lessons. So here, this is how you create that. But sometimes you want to achieve a little bit different effect. For example, let's take this star from here, and you can change the ratio to something like this. And you think, yeah, but where can I use that? Well, first of all, by playing with the count in addition to that, you can reduce the number of elements, and this is how you can create the Mercedes shape super fast in just a couple of clicks. As you can see, now we have Mercedes, and because now you know how to create an ellipse from the middle point right from here, holding Option and Shift, you create a shape like this, and later I'll show you how to do this. And now you have a Mercedes sign, super fast and easy in just a couple of clicks. How much it would take you to create this shape manually? Oh my God, it would be really hard. So this is how you create Mercedes. Let me show you another place where you can use this star, and specifically this star with thin parameters, thin ratio, small ratio, like 4 when you have just 4 items. Now it looks like a real star. You can create it, you can use it to create the night sky, or where I personally, for example, use it usually when I create illustrations. And let's imagine that I have an illustration like this. And I have something like this. But at the same time, I want to have to show that we have light here, and this object that I'm creating is really shiny. And to create this shiny object effect, I can create just this star. Let's make it a little bit smaller. I put it somewhere here, and I create another one, and I put it here, and I also rotate it a little bit. And if I change it to white, now I see that it's glowing. Of course, when we'll start working with the graphic design, I'll show you exactly where I'm using it for creating like illustrations for gems, for buttons, for games. When we are creating buttons for games, we'll discuss it there. But this is why it's cool to understand what parameters you can play with when you're working with shapes. And the next shape is still star, but I want to show you when you're changing the ratio. Oh, by the way, another thing is when you create lots of counts, this is where you can create the thing like here. And then when we'll start working with text, then you can create something like this. Orange, or it can be green. Then we select text, smaller, rotate a little bit. And this is how you create different effects when you want to show like discount, when you want to specifically when you're creating banners. It's a graphic design elements that we are using on websites as well. This is where you can create banners by using, again, star shape, and by changing the ratio to something different. When you want to create a flower, you can do the same. You can do something like this. When you want to create, let's imagine gears, you will do the same thing. By just changing count, you can create different shapes and elements like this. And you can attract attention to one specific, like, boom, take a look, minus 40% here. So please, my recommendation to you now, after this lesson, what I recommend you to do, just go here in the shape panel and start creating rectangle. Start creating rectangle in different directions, many rectangles. Holding Shift, start creating squares. Then press I, just click, create 100 by 100%. Then press R and press Option Shift and start dragging. This is how you create these different shapes here. And go one by one and play with them. Once you created a line, then start moving it again, create the line, holding Shift, create the line, holding Shift and Option. Don't watch this video as just a YouTube video. Honestly, if you want to achieve great results in design, if you want to become super efficient, if you want to be the best designer in the world, I recommend you to practice. And while for you maybe like, yeah, but let's create websites, let's create something complex, let's create everything complex, starts with simple. And by doing this simple exercise, you achieve the best results. The best people in the world start with basics, start with fundamentals. So my recommendation to you, want to become super efficient, even if you are a senior super pro in Figma designer, still continue practicing it. Still play with these simple elements and you will see it will change your efficiency tremendously. So my recommendation to you, go and play with shapes. And I'll see you in the next lesson where we'll be talking about groups and frames. See you there.